You always pivot back to, yeah, but the real problem's Israel.
You're famous for interview style that begins with condemn this group, that group. You let me finish before you...
What they're about.
That doesn't justify killing 500 people in a single day, does
I didn't say it did, but
that's what bothers me. That's what happened this week. That's the big story. Hezbollah's charter is irrelevant to what we're talking about. That's not why they killed 500 people on Monday, Piers. Hezbollah's charter has been around for years.
I don't think it's irrelevant that you have a terror group on your doorstep who are wedded to your extinction. Why is that irrelevant?
I think the language you use is loaded, Piers. You say on your doorstep. Do you know they did a poll of Americans a while back who thought that Palestinians were occupying Israel? When we talk about this stuff, we make it sound like Israel is the one being occupied, besieged. Israel's the one that's occupying the West Bank, Gaza, longest military occupation in the world, going back to 1967. Israel is the country that occupied southern Lebanon. I mean, everything, the world did not begin on October the 7th. 1978, Israel invades southern Lebanon. 1982, Israel invades southern Lebanon. Sabra and Shatila massacre. 2006, Second Lebanon War, murder 100 people.
But you always make it sound like they're just doing this for the sake of it. They're not.
What are they doing it for?
Well, they've been provoked by Hezbollah.
Hezbollah didn't exist in 1978.
In this video, Piers Morgan is once again caught in 4K, lying through his teeth and acting like a paid Israel agent. You are about to see him repeat the exact same script provided to him by the Israeli lobby, trying desperately to defend the indefensible in front of Mehdi Hasan. But as always, Piers Morgan is left speechless and stunned by Mehdi, who absolutely destroys him and literally laughs in his face for his paid representation of Zionist propaganda. This is just the start. If you don't watch until the end, I promise you will miss the moment Piers' entire narrative crumbles. Let's get into it.
Piers?
Okay, I'm talking about the specifics of going on now. The provocation since October the 7th, Hezbollah's first response to October the 7th was to unleash rockets on Israel.
That's not true.
On October the 8th.
That's not true. That's not true.
That is what happened.
Where did they fire the first rocket?
They fired rockets on the 8th.
Where?
Well, you tell me.
No, you just said they fired at Israel. Where?
Well, they fired in the direction of Israel.
Where did they hit? They fired at the Sheba Farms.
Answer, tell me.
I do. They fired at the Sheba Farms, which, as I said earlier, is an area of Syria. Well, the Lebanese claim it's Lebanon. Syria claims it's Lebanon. Israel says no and is occupying the Sheba Farms. They fired at Israeli military installations in the Sheba Farms. Now, have they got fired in Israel?
So
since?
they were firing at Israel. They were firing
Yes.
at an area that Israel says is theirs.
No, Israel doesn't say that. Israel says it's Syria's. Because remember, Piers, Israel is occupying Syria and the West Bank and Gaza, and Lebanon would argue parts of Lebanon. This is the problem, right? The core of the problem is Israel's territorial expansionism.
It's a mess.
Attacks, not a mess. It's Israel occupying multiple Arab lands, which leads to quote-unquote resistance or quote-unquote terrorism, whichever word. I don't care what word you want to use right now. But that is the core, right? You had John Mearsheimer on the show this week, made the same point. Deal with the occupation, then you deal with the violence. And look, has Hezbollah fired into Israel at civilian targets? Yes, I don't agree with that. But the reality is 82% of the exchange of fire between Lebanon and Israel since October the 7th has been done by Israel.
Okay.
82%.
But
is that not a provocation of
Let
Hezbollah?
me finish my point, which is that since October the 8th, 19,000 missiles, rockets have come from Hezbollah to Israel, right?
But way more from Israel into Lebanon.
Well, I'm sure,
82%.
Of course they've responded. What else are they supposed to do?
82%.
But
this is not two equal sides.
So they can't defend themselves.
But the vast majority of attacks is on Lebanon.
Okay, but would you condemn the firing of rockets by Hezbollah or not?
Of course, I condemn all attacks on civilian targets.
Well,
we know that, Piers. We've discussed this.
I'm going to come to Israel's response.
I don't come on shows to defend militant groups or foreign governments.
Okay. So
I come on shows to say, let's end the violence.
Yeah.
Let's sort out what the solution is.
Yeah.
Let's look at the root cause of the violence. It is undeniable that the root cause of the violence is Israel, Israel's occupation, the genocide in Gaza. What did the leader of Hezbollah say? He said, we won't fire any rockets if you end the killing in Gaza. What did the president of Iran say? We won't retaliate for what you did to Ismail Haniyeh on Iranian soil if you end the killing in Gaza. What did the Houthis say? We'll stop blocking ships if you end the killing in Gaza. Where do all roads lead back to?
Why would you believe any of those people?
I don't believe any of them. I'm Ronald Reagan.
You're citing them as if they're sort of gospel statements from people who have unimpeachable.
I'll tell you why, if you let me finish. I'm Ronald Reagan.
A bunch of terrorists said, we won't do X, Y, Z if you do this.
I'm Ronald Reagan. I say verify. Call their bluff. If they're lying, call their bluff. Stop the Gaza fighting and then see what happens.
Yeah, but Israel has called Hamas's bluff.
When?
There was a ceasefire in place before October the 7th.
That's not true.
Well, it is true.
That's not true.
Well, it is true.
It's fundamentally false. They were attacking Palestinians the week before October the 7th. In September, you can Google it on that tablet. What's your definition of a ceasefire?
Well,
Israel gets to attack people and not the other way around.
Okay.
In September, hold on. In September, you just made a charge that's not true. There's a tablet there. You can Google it. Guardian headline, right there. You can go see the news report.
I don't Google during interviews.
Well, afterwards, everyone can. There's a Guardian headline, September 2023, a month before October the 7th. The headline is Palestinians shot in the ankles by Israel in Gaza, attacked. There were airstrikes in Gaza. And by the way, Gaza is not isolated. Gaza and the West Bank under international law are one entity. There were several hundred Palestinians killed in the West Bank before October.
But my point to you, Mehdi, is
so there was no ceasefire. You just can't say it's just not true.
They would say there was a ceasefire,
and it's not true.
We'd say otherwise.
The facts say otherwise, Piers.
But what I've noticed with you is
first, look at how Piers tries to rewrite history by claiming there was a ceasefire before October 7th. This isn't just a mistake. It is a verifiable lie, and Mehdi Hasan exposes it with cold, hard facts. When Mehdi mentions Israel shooting protesters in the ankles, Piers freezes. He refuses to check the tablet because he knows he's wrong. Here is the exact data he is hiding from his audience. Number one, the ankles report. On October 5th, 2023, literally 2 days before October 7th, Friday's Democracy now reported that Israeli snipers were deliberately maiming Gaza protesters by targeting their legs. Number two, the death toll. Before October 7th, Israel had already killed 227 Palestinians in the West Bank in 2023 alone. And number three, the bombings. Israel bombed Gaza for 3 consecutive days. In late September 2023, Piers calls this a ceasefire, but Mehdi exposes it for what it is, an occupation. Piers defines peace as Palestinians dying quietly. This proves he isn't a journalist here. He is a PR manager for Israel.
You always downplay anything which might be deemed by Israel to be provocation.
No.
You're always
not at all. Did I downplay October 7th? I don't think I ever have on your show or anywhere else. No, but, it's a horrible crime.
But what you do, in your debating style, and it's an impressive debating style, but you always pivot back to, but the real problem's Israel. Yeah, but the real problem's Israel.
Hold on. If we're going to talk about styles, Piers, you're famous for interview style that begins with condemn this group, that group, that group. On Monday, 500... Hold on. Let me finish my point, then you come back in. 500 people were killed on Monday. 100 women, 50 children. I assume you condemn that and don't support the killing of civilians in Lebanon, right? 500 people died. That's the equivalent of 30,000 Americans or 6,000 Brits in a day.
Sure.
And yet we started this interview with Hezbollah Charter. So if you're going to talk about styles, you're focusing on the wrong thing.
Okay.
I'm going to focus on 500 people dead.
Let me go back to the week before, where 3,000 Hezbollah terrorists were targeted specifically.
How do you know that?
What do you mean? How do I know that?
You just said 3,000 Hezbollah terrorists were targeted.
How many was it?
I don't know. I'm asking you. Made the claim.
That is what's been reported.
By
Do
who?
you dispute that?
Yeah, I dispute everything Israel says. They've lied for a year, Piers.
You don't know the real number.
But I didn't give a number. You did.
Well, what has been the number from the other side?
I didn't give a number. You said 3,000 terrorists. I'm wondering why a journalist...
That is what's been reported.
No, it's not reported. It's what's said by Israel. Or it's what's said by people speaking on behalf of Israel.
So
was a little girl who died?
Hang on. Israel hasn't even said it, did it?
They have in private. It's been reported widely. To the American government.
Okay, but don't say they said it publicly. They haven't.
But...
Obviously, I believe they did it, right? But
I believe they did it too.
You're saying they said this in public.
You just gave a 3,000 number, and I'm wondering... I just saw a little girl's funeral last week. Was she a Hezbollah terrorist, in your view?
No.
So then why did you say 3,000 terrorists? There was a kid killed.
No, I was about to say that in the process of targeting very specifically, in an extraordinarily, whichever way you look at it...
In a terror attack?
Well, that's what I'm going to come to. So they target 3,000 Hezbollah terrorists with their pagers, walkie-talkies, and so on. In the process, a small... comparative to that number, a small number of civilians get killed, which is obviously deplorable. But my point to you is, if someone's been chucking rockets over for a year at you and your people, you've had to displace 60,000 people from the north of your country because of his relentless bombardment, and you eventually respond in such a precise, targeted fashion, right? And in the process, some civilians are killed, which is never acceptable, can never be condoned, never be supported. But if it is right, as has been widely reported by all mainstream media, that 3,000 terrorists...
people associated with Hezbollah. Not everybody in Hezbollah is a terrorist.
Okay.
Like a driver, a nurse.
3,000 members of Hezbollah were targeted, right?
Yeah.
Would you say that is... Some people have claimed it's unlawful. You've said it's a terror attack. So you think it was illegal. But I would say that's not. I mean, I would say that if you look at that in totality, they are responding to rocket attacks all year, and they are being extremely precise, unlike what they've been doing in Gaza, where I do not accept that Israel has been doing this precision targeting they keep talking about, and I've held them to account for that. I do think in this particular occasion, they were extremely precise, and it was a brilliant piece of warfare, right, if you want to call it that. Notwithstanding.
Next, listen to the disturbing way Piers Morgan talks about the pager attacks in Lebanon. He literally calls a terror attack that exploded in grocery stores, funerals, and homes a brilliant piece of warfare. This is disgusting, and Mehdi Hasan refuses to let it slide. Piers pulls a number out of thin air, 3,000 terrorists, and uses it to justify the attack. But here is the reality Piers is ignoring. The targeted myth. Piers calls this precise, but UN human rights experts condemned it as a terrifying violation of international law because it was indiscriminate. These devices exploded in the hands of nurses, doctors, and even children. The casualties. Among the dead were a 9-year-old girl and an 11-year-old boy. They were not terrorists, Piers. They were children. The maiming. The attack resulted in over 500 severe eye injuries. Doctors in Beirut reported removing the eyes of hundreds of patients, many of whom were civilians, simply standing near a device. When Piers says, "I believe they did it," regarding the 3,000 number, he admits he has no evidence. He is justifying the mass maiming of civilians based on blind faith in a genocidal regime. Mehdi rightly destroys him here. You cannot illegally booby-trap thousands of civilian objects, a direct violation of Protocol 2 of the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons, and call it warfare. That is the definition of terrorism.
I don't like any war, nor do you. But my point is, surely that is justified. I mean, in some parts of this, you have to say Israel's entitled to defend itself.
So actually, Lebanon is the one that needs to defend itself, as we say, 500 people killed on a day. Look, you are right. You have held. I've watched your interviews with Israeli spokespersons. You have held them to account on their nonsense about casualty numbers. But let me just say 3 very brief things on that. Number one, you said just a moment ago, when they eventually respond, you use that phrase eventually. That's just factually inaccurate. We already discussed.
No, you talked about
82% of the attacks. They have been bombing Lebanon for a year. Now, you can say who started it, whatever. I'm not talking about. But they've been attacking Lebanon.
But this is a significant escalation.
Yes, but 5 days after October the 7th, or 6 days after, they killed a Reuters video journalist in southern Lebanon, a man called Issam Abdullah, killed, according to Reporters Without Borders, targeted by Israel. According to the UN, a war crime, right? So they have been killing people in Lebanon who have nothing to do with Hezbollah for a year now. So let's not say eventually. Number two, I would say, yes, it's an act of terror. And that's just not my view. You know Leon Panetta, former Obama defense secretary, former head of the CIA. When the former head of the CIA comes out and says Israel is committing an act of terror, I think we should take that seriously. But it's not just him. A group of UN special rapporteurs on human rights and extrajudicial killings put out a statement.
But many other people have said it was not an act of terror. Of course,
and that's the problem with international law. People can argue it all ways. You know that you and I are not lawyers, but we know that lawyers can argue multiple things.
But do you not think that action was justified?
No, of course not. I don't think you should booby-trap devices. It's against international law to use booby traps. I think I'm actually petrified, separate to the politics of the Middle East, Piers. I'm actually petrified at the ability of governments to use technology and surveillance to track us and now kill us. I think there's a wider discussion to be had. I think the idea that Israel keeps opening the doors to all sorts of new precedents that other governments will run with and we will regret. I think, going into the supply chain of devices, phones, beepers, whatever, pagers, I think that's very, very worrying. I also think from a practical point of view, it's not targeted. If you blow up a guy with a pager, even if you think he's a terrorist or a terrorist leader, you don't know if he's driving, he's at an intersection, he's about to crash his car into children crossing the road. We saw them going off in grocery stores. It's taken out people's eyes, fingers. No, I don't think it's targeted. I think it's barbaric. I think it's illegal. And I also think, look, I say this all the time. Even if I was an Israeli, I would not support this. It doesn't make Israel safer. Do you think Israel's safer today?
Would you support then any military?
They just fired a rocket at Tel Aviv.
Let me ask you, would you then, by your criteria, is there any military response that Israel can give, first to what Hamas did on October the 7th, and second to what Hezbollah has been doing ever since? Is there any military response Israel can do which in your eyes would be justified?
Well, I don't accept the loaded question. You say response. Israel is the aggressor in all of these places. As I say, they are illegally...
the aggressor on October the 7th, was it?
Well, it was actually, because it was occupying Gaza and it was besieging Gaza for 20 years, and even in Israeli general...
You're sounding like you think it was justified what Hamas did.
No.
It's one or the other.
Why? Wait, how is it justified?
So it wasn't justified?
Of course not. I've said that many times.
So was Israel not entitled to respond?
No, but I'm questioning you use the word response. Response implies everything starts on October 7th.
No,
I don't accept your timeline.
I've never said that.
Well, you keep saying response.
to that specific terror attack, in a way that if in England somebody suddenly launched an attack on our people and they killed 1,200 and wounded nearly 7,000, I would absolutely expect my government to respond with substantial force. Would you?
Yes, but Britain...
So you would?
Hold on. But is Britain occupying territory in that scenario? Because that's the key point here. It's Shlomo Brom...
It's dangerous wording.
It's not dangerous, because I'm
making it sound like... I don't disagree with you.
I'm going to quote... If you let me finish, before you keep suggesting I'm supporting October 7th, which I have not...
Sounds like you're justifying it to me.
Well,
you're saying,
you're not paying attention.
They're being occupied.
They are occupied, or they're not occupied.
I think they probably are, yeah.
Not probably, the ICJ says they're occupied. Yeah. Shlomo Brom, who's one of the former top Israeli generals, one of their big strategists, said after October the 7th, what did you expect? If you keep people under military occupation,
is that what you think?
They will rise up. Yeah, of course. Think? There's always going to be terrorism.
What do you expect?
Yeah, there's always going to be terrorism and violence as long as you oppress people.
On that scale, you expected that?
No, obviously, I don't expect the details, but do you expect Palestinians to fight back? Of course you do. Everyone who's sane, who looks at this conflict from American presidents downwards would say the root cause of the violence has to be ending the conflict.
I agree.
So then, talking about tit-for-tat responses,
but I also think if you go back
no
to
sense.
If you go back to the start in 1948, which I've had many scholars on from both sides of this, probably the most interesting piece I read about this was Jonathan Friedland of The Guardian, who's a Jewish journalist, who concluded, you can construct, if you're reasonably fair-minded about all this, you can construct a solid argument for both sides to feel aggrieved from the very start of this conflict.
Fair enough. And that's a different argument. I'm talking about what you talk about now. My point is,
when people say it didn't start October the 7th...
Well, I'm not even going back to 1948. I'm talking about 20 years of Gaza under blockade.
I know.
Piers. Yeah, open-air prison camp, to quote David Cameron, that well-known pro-Palestinian lefty.
But also Hamas, in that process since 2005, have clearly run Gaza in a despicable manner.
Agreed.
You wouldn't disagree?
No.
So it's not all Israel's fault, is it?
Well, no, because you're mixing different things up. Is Hamas...
You're always very keen to put it all on Israel.
No, because if we're talking about...
I try and be a little bit more like, hang on, when you commit a terror attack to the scale of October 7th...
You both sides occupation and illegal...
No, I don't.
Yeah, you are. You just said, I try and be fair. You can't be fair to an occupier. By the way, when we talk about Russia and Ukraine, this is what frustrates me. And I know my friend Owen Jones sat here and said the same thing to you. When we talk about Russia and Ukraine, you don't do both sides. You blame Russia as the invader and occupier. You don't do that with Israel. That is the double standard on your part.
No,
I try and be consistent, Piers. I'm morally consistent. I say Russia... Hold on, let me finish the sentence. Russia illegally invaded and occupied Israel and illegally annexed Crimea. And Israel is doing the same thing in the West Bank, Gaza, the Golan Heights.
As you know, they are completely different.
Yeah, Israel's worse. It's been going on much longer. Well, people living under much worse conditions.
And
they've killed more kids.
But there is no similarity in these two situations.
Agreed. Israel's is worse.
It's not.
How many kids have been killed in Ukraine versus Gaza?
Well, in 1 year.
Ever.
In 1 year?
Ever. Take whatever point you want. More kids have been killed in Gaza than in Ukraine.
Okay.
Every human rights group agrees with that.
What's happened in Ukraine? We can come to Ukraine. What happened in Ukraine is a Russian dictator invaded illegally.
We agree on Ukraine.
Yeah.
But we don't agree on Israel because you're not consistent.
I think Israel is much more complicated.
That's complicated, as my friend Ta-Nehisi Coates pointed out the other day, is just a good way of avoiding attributing moral responsibility. It's complicated. No, it's not complicated, actually. Israel is the occupier under international law. Israel is the one killing the vast majority of civilians. Right now, it's not a liberal democracy. It's run by neo-fascists now.
Well, I don't disagree with you. There are some right-wing headbangers on that cabinet. I also think that Netanyahu has to go. I also think the whole of Hamas have to go, right?
Under no scenario is it a liberal democracy right now. Palestinians do not have the same rights.
But let me come back to my point about Hezbollah, because that's the most current part of this crisis over there. We'll cover all this. We've got plenty of time. With Hezbollah, my point to you would simply be that if someone does what Hezbollah did on October the 8th, has carried on doing it all year, they have a charter which says they want to eradicate Israel, you have to defend yourself. So the question then becomes, what type of defence or response or reaction or revenge, whatever you want to call it, I don't want you to get caught in the semantics of a word, but what kind of thing can Israel do, given that direct threat to them, to their existence? And the same sort of ideology applies in argument to Hamas. But with Hezbollah specifically, this state within a state in Lebanon, which is far better armed, far more powerful, far more resourced.
Far more popular with the people, part of the government. It's much more part of Lebanese society.
And was created by 1,500 members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard.
Supported, not created, but yes.
Well, they trained.
I mean, they're also indigenous to Lebanon.
They trained.
They're not a foreign force.
So my point is, what can Israel do that would actually tick your box of being justified?
My box is a very minimum box. My box is Hippocratic. Do no harm, don't kill civilians. So
you don't respond?
No. You don't respond. This is the same argument with Gaza. You don't.
Guys, sorry for the interruption, but this is a very important thing you should know. I had to pause here because Piers Morgan is using a very manipulative debating tactic called the false dilemma. And if you blink, you will miss it. Listen closely to what just happened. What can Israel do that is justified? Mehdi gives a simple moral answer: don't kill civilians. And what is Piers Morgan's immediate reaction? He says, you don't respond. Let that sink in. In Piers Morgan's mind, responding and killing civilians are the same thing. He literally cannot imagine a version of self-defense that follows the rules of war. To him, if you are not slaughtering families in their homes, you are not defending yourself. This is not an accident. This is a specific military strategy that Piers is covering for, known as the Dahiya Doctrine. For those who don't know, the Dahiya Doctrine is an Israeli military strategy formulated in 2006. It explicitly calls for the use of disproportionate force against civilian infrastructure to pressure the population. It is a war crime by definition. When Piers says, what kind of thing can Israel do given the threat to their existence? He is justifying this doctrine. He is trying to trick you into thinking that Israel's only option for survival is mass slaughter. But Mehdi destroys this framing. He points out that you can target combatants without leveling an entire city block. Piers refuses to accept this because his job is to make you believe that war crimes are actually self-defense. Don't let him get away with it.
Respond by killing 40,000 people.
What do you do?
What do you do?
What do you do if you're Israel?
Target Hezbollah people.
How?
I don't know. Jonathan Conricus came on your show last week.
They couldn't have been.
IDF colonel. He said they're not in civilian areas, so we're able to target them. Okay, target them then if you want to target them. Under the rules of war, you can target combatants. But Piers, hold on. You just said earlier. Let me finish my point. Then you come back in.
No, Mehdi.
Go on. Then I'm going to finish my point.
You literally just said you can target combatants.
Yes.
But when they did that last week with the walkie-talkies and pages, you said, no, that's a terror attack. It's illegal.
Hold on.
Couldn't there have been a more precise targeting of combatants?
Because A, they didn't just target combatants, as we've just discussed. B,
very
they did it in
small number of
civilian
civilians
areas.
were caught
And
up.
C, they did it in violation of the amended Protocol 2 of the Convention on Certain Conventional
you would
Weapons,
never
which
think-
doesn't allow booby traps.
So there is no...
I already explained the booby traps.
Actually, no, that's not true. It's not true.
Okay.
Booby traps are not allowed if they are genuinely indiscriminate in the way that they
You don't think going off in a grocery store is indiscriminate?
No, actually, I believe what I've seen...
You gave the British example earlier, Piers. Are you okay with someone blowing you up in Sainsbury's, the guy next to you, blowing you up in the aisle of Sainsbury's?
I believe that what has been reported, right, widely reported, is that 3,000 terrorist militants, Hezbollah members, whatever you want to call them, were very precisely targeted.
Are you saying people
by your criteria?
Did they go off in grocery stores and hospitals?
If it's legal,
Piers, did they go off in grocery stores and hospitals? No, you brought up the UK earlier. We're in London right now. If I go from here to the local Sainsbury's to pick up some chocolate on the way out of the studio, and a terrorist is targeted next to me and they're blowing up in Sainsbury's and I lose my eyes, you're saying that's okay?
No, but if you have
Sounds
people...
like you're saying it's okay.
If those people in that grocery store are literally responsible for firing rocket after rocket at
You're
a
okay with them being blown up with me? I'm just collateral damage.
I actually looked at what they did and I thought it was a very precisely targeted...
What about the 500? What about the 500 civilians killed on Monday, which you just don't want to talk about?
No, I'm going to come to that.
You keep saying that. The time's nearly up. 500 people.
The time is not nearly up.
Well,
we'll be talking for literally 15 minutes. Stop
500
racing the clock down.
I have another
Mehdi.
show to do, Piers.
Hang on.
500 people died on Monday.
I've come in early for you.
500.
I was looking for a thank you, Piers.
Thank you, Piers. 500 people were killed on Monday. You're not talking about that. And I would say it sounds like you're justifying that.
I am going to talk about that.
I've not justified October 7th.
First of all, though, before we get to that, I just want to get inside your head about what you think is legitimate, because you said a very interesting thing. One, what they did was a terror attack, even though they would say they targeted specifically combatants, and that is lawful.
But that's not true, though. We know that's not true.
Well, it is true.
It's not true.
It is true. You can never...
Kids, doctors, nurses.
No, you can never target combatants and not involve civilians ever.
That's funny because Israel were bragging, well, people on behalf of Israel.
Tell me one war.
Didn't they kill Ismail Haniyeh without collateral damage?
Tell me one.
Hold on, didn't they kill Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran without collateral damage?
Tell me one war where that's happened.
I just told you. You just interrupted me twice. Ismail Haniyeh was killed in Tehran. There was no collateral damage.
But
now, I don't agree with that killing, but there was no collateral damage.
But to be clear, you think that the targeting of combatants is legitimate?
If you're in a war... Okay. And they are fighting with you, and they are fighters. Yeah, of course it's legitimate.
But you also think that when Israel targeted combatants from Hezbollah last week,
because I don't accept
in a very
the premise
precise way,
I don't accept the premise.
It's terrorism.
Yeah, I don't.
How can it be both?
Hold on. Leon Panetta says it's terrorism, the former head of the CIA, not just me. Well, you act like it's some crazy extreme view. If the head of the CIA, the former head of the CIA is saying this is terrorism, because it's
I want you
not
to
done.
explain what is. So, give me an example.
It's literally terror. People in Lebanon don't know what devices to use anymore.
You think killing? Well, Hezbollah don't know.
By the way,
devices
I'm not
to
playing this game, Piers, because I'm not here to talk about the rules of war. My position is, even if it's legitimate,
use. You just talked about them.
No, because I'm saying even if it's legitimate, even if I accepted the 3,000 is legitimate, which I don't, I still don't think they should do it.
But
Because
you said targeting.
Can I finish a sentence?
You said targeting militants,
yes,
combatants is lawful and justified.
Yes, but even then, I don't think you should do it.
Okay.
You know what? Can I finish a sentence?
I think there's an inconsistency there.
No, I'm very consistent. I'm saying even if it's legitimate, which in this case it's not legitimate. Let's say I take the saying it's legitimate. You still shouldn't do it because all it leads to is escalation. I don't want escalation in the Middle East. I don't want a regional war that America dragged into. I'm saying that the way of the gun, the military solution to everything, is a failure, whether you think it's moral or immoral.
How should Israel respond?
I've told you, end the occupation. You don't want to talk about the occupation, Piers. You don't want to talk about the 500 dead. I'm telling you that's the root cause. Israel wants to do everything except what every smart person is telling them to do. Even members of their own security establishment are telling them to do. End the occupation. And then see what happens.
You say
nobody's waking up in the morning saying we want to kill Israel for no reason.
You say, Mehdi, all roads lead to the occupation.
Yes.
Okay. Israel would say all roads lead to Iran.
Who cares what Israel says? They've lied for the last year. They've lied for 30
years. Who cares what they say?
Yeah. Do you care what Russia says?
No.
This is what I'm saying. You're inconsistent. The occupier and the invader doesn't. I don't care.
It's not a barbaric.
So if you're a liberal democracy, first of all, they're not a liberal democracy, and second of all,
well, they are.
No, they're not. They're an ethnocracy. But even if they were a liberal democracy, you don't get to invade other people's land. That's not an excuse. Piers, you sound like you're justifying an illegal military occupation here.
No, I'm not.
You just did. You said they're a liberal democracy. Sounds like you're justifying occupation.
You're extrapolating two things together. Why?
I said it's an occupation. You said, but they're a liberal democracy. Sounds like a justification.
I'm just coming back to one thing because I'm curious what you think Israel could do that would pass your test.
It's probably not much. I'm as close. I'm as close to a pacifist as you can get. I think you only use force
is not
to defend yourself.
Everyone else to attack you and to rape and murder and pillage you, to fire rockets all year.
Who's raping and
You don't think that's what Hamas did in October?
I thought we were talking about Hezbollah. You're jumping around.
No, I'm talking about both.
You were talking about Hezbollah a moment ago.
Well, it's the same. To me, it's the same.
But that's the problem. To you, it's the same. Everything's very simplistic.
Let me
explain why.
Let me explain why. You have two.
Lebanon is way more complicated.
To me, you have two groups of terrorists funded by Iran. They both are wedded to the existential removal and disintegration of all things Israel, and they're prepared to use a lot of violence to achieve that.
But not as much violence as Israel has used to occupy their land for 50 years in the case of Gaza and the West Bank.
So your argument is whatever Hamas has done and whatever Hezbollah does is justified.
No. The only person justifying violence here is you, Piers, not me. So I've not justified any violence today. You've justified terrorist attacks via pages. You seem to have justified the occupation. You won't even say occupation.
I do think the specific targeting of Hezbollah in the way that they did it...
Do you think it makes Israel safer?
That's a different question.
Well, that's the question that matters to me.
I think Israel feels...
There's no point doing all this,
and at the
end of the day, the war continues. I want to end the conflict, Piers.
Finally, we arrive at the most embarrassing moment for Piers Morgan in this entire interview. Just when he has completely lost the argument on facts, just when he has no defense for the slaughter of civilians, he pivots to the oldest, most tired line in the Zionist playbook. He calls Israel a liberal democracy. Listen to the desperation in his voice. It is such a paid-for, scripted line that even Mehdi Hasan has to laugh in his face. Piers is trying to claim moral superiority for an occupying power, but let's look at the facts that Piers is terrified to mention. How can you call a country a liberal democracy when its national security minister is Itamar Ben-Gvir? This is a man convicted by an Israeli court for supporting a terrorist organization and inciting racism. How can you call it a democracy on that when the finance minister is Bezalel Smotrich, a man who has literally described himself on record as a fascist homophobe? Piers knows this. He knows the government is run by extremists, but he sticks to his script because he is not there to tell the truth. He is there to protect the narrative. Mehdi shuts this down perfectly. You do not get to illegally occupy land for 50 years and slaughter 40,000 people, put millions of Palestinians under military martial law, and then hide behind the title of democracy. That is not democracy. It was Piers, that is apartheid. And that is exactly what the International Court of Justice is investigating right now. Notice what Piers does when his script runs out. He stutters, he panics, and then he pivots to Iran. What about Iran? What about the Ayatollah? This is the classic tactic of a paid shill. When you cannot defend the crimes of your client, you point at someone else. Piers Morgan has been completely exposed. He has no answers for the reality of the occupation, so he deflects. This isn't journalism. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a humiliating defeat.